Slack presents a not-for-profit with a $50,000 bill. The U.S.'s new H-1B visa fee could backfire and reduce U.S. jobs. OpenAI admits AI hallucinations may be impossible to eliminate entirely. And who controls what we see online? Welcome to #Trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Let's get into it. Hack Club, a not-for-profit that runs coding clubs for high school students, says Slack gave them an ultimatum: pay $50,000 US in 1 week or lose access to years of messages and integrations. Hack Club had been on Slack's non-profit plan, paying around $5,000 a year, and then almost overnight, Salesforce-owned Slack raised the price tenfold. That left a small nonprofit scrambling to save its data and rebuild its workflows. They called the demand absurd, pointing out that even if they wanted to pay, no organization can rebudget in a week. The public backlash forced Slack to at least reach out. Its CEO promised to make things right and offer Hack Club a better deal than before. But Hack Club says the trust may be gone. They're actively looking at open source alternatives to make sure they're never caught off guard again. This isn't just a non-profit problem. Vendor lock-in is a risk for anyone running on software as a service. Once your history, your data, and your processes live inside a provider's platform, you are at their mercy. We saw it clearly when Broadcom took over VMware and customers faced steep price hikes and license changes, even perpetual licenses that they had bought. I've always said that the first question you should ask when evaluating a SaaS vendor is simple. What happens if we want out? European governments have recently leaned on cloud providers to ensure there's a valid exit strategy and one that won't bankrupt the company. But there's nothing like this for SaaS providers. Now, SaaS undoubtedly has real value, but you take a risk. You can become dependent on it, and you could get what I've called the Hotel California syndrome. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. The Trump administration has introduced a one-time fee of $100,000 for every new H-1B visa. These visas are how U.S. companies bring in highly skilled workers from offshore. Sometimes they bring in experts and resources that they just can't find in the U.S. Sometimes these are liaisons that work with large tech centers, particularly in India. Now, these visas normally come at a cost of about $1,000 or so, and the legal fees, and you make a declaration that the people who are coming in on these visas have skills that cannot be found by the company hiring Americans. There's no question Indian IT firms dominate this program. Last year, they accounted for 71% of all H-1B visa holders. And most of that comes from the new model of IT offshoring. For decades, the business model has depended on rotating staff into U.S. projects, sitting with clients, keeping work flowing smoothly between the American offices and the offshore teams. For those who want all the jobs onshore, might not be optimal, but it did maintain an onshore component of the work. But that model may break down because it just got a lot more expensive. For India's $283 billion tech industry, which gets more than half of its revenue from U.S. clients, the calculation is simple. If it costs that much to bring staff in, the work will have to be done offshore or perhaps nearshore in markets like Canada and Mexico. Ganesh Natajaran, former CEO of Zenzar Technologies, told Reuters that the American dream for aspiring Indian workers will now be tough, and that firms will restrict cross-border travel and push more work out of the U.S. entirely. So that's the irony. A policy meant to protect U.S. jobs could actually end up reducing the amount of work done onshore, and presumably these workers, even if they are from offshore, are paying taxes and spending money in the U.S. And we also presume that some jobs are maintained onshore as well. What is highly unlikely is, given the cost savings and the solutions to resource issues that organizations apparently get from offshoring, that any of this work will move back to the U.S. It could happen, but it's going to be a question of what is least problematic. Moving the work back to the U.S. and trying to find trained resources, putting up with additional costs, or having additional functions done remotely over Teams or Zoom and similar remote tools. The most likely alternative might leave American employment weaker and not stronger. And in a stunning admission, OpenAI said hallucinations in large language models aren't just engineering flaws, they're mathematically inevitable. In a new paper, OpenAI and Georgia Tech scientists showed that even with perfect data, systems like ChatGPT will sometimes generate convincing but false statements, what we call hallucinations. The reasons lie in the statistical nature of language models. Like a student stuck on a tough exam question, when the model hits something it can't answer, it will make its best guess rather than admit what it doesn't know. The study also warns that current benchmarks may be making things worse. Models are tuned to perform well on tests that reward the right answers. They have penalties for the wrong answers. But what they can't cope with is when the model says it doesn't know, that's not as bad as a wrong answer. But it's just not an option on these benchmark tests. It's important to note that the study claims that the problem can occur regardless of how accurate the underlying data is. So techniques like RAG, retrieval augmented generation, or cleaning training data might reduce errors, but it won't solve the problem totally. The math says hallucinations can't be eliminated. That points to a need for human oversight, which confronts another set of inevitable errors. Humans have their own blind spots. As the Dunning-Kruger effect shows, people are most wrong when they're most confident as well. So, what do we do? Well, before we throw up our hands and claim that AI is over, we've stopped the progress, because that's not likely, the fact is there are an enormous number of tasks that can be and are performed with some degree of error. And where exactness is required, say in accounting or navigation, we already use well-tested algorithms to do those jobs. AI is at its best when problems and answers have some room for variance. Managing that balance will be the real challenge of managing AI. And in many ways, it's not that different from the challenges we already have, managing people. And finally, another societal issue that we have to address came to the fore this week. Now, this is not a new issue. For years, we've been in a debate about how much the social media algorithms influence what we think and how we behave. And more recently, there have been huge debates about who controls these algorithms. Elon Musk famously said that he thought that social media, Twitter in particular, was too skewed to what they call the left. So he wanted to skew the algorithm of his social media platform, which he renamed as X, to remove what he feels is a bias. And he's extended that same belief to his artificial intelligence offering. But when they adjusted Grok, the AI swung from criticizing Musk for his contribution to misinformation to declaring itself Mecha Hitler. It's things like this that are at the core of a growing debate about who controls what we see and hear online. This weekend, 2 stories brought the idea of controlling what we see and say into sharp focus. First, Sarah Wynne Williams, author of a book critical of Meta, said she faces bankruptcy after Facebook and Instagram allegedly banned her ability to promote her best-selling book. And of course, you'd have to be vacationing off the planet to have missed the firing of comedian Jimmy Kimmel, purportedly at the insistence of the U.S. government. Now, forget about the arguments about whether either of these parties were right about what they said or whether they should be chastised for their opinion. Let's take that off the table. We still have to decide, are we comfortable with the full force of either the government or a multi-billion-dollar social media company targeting an individual whose ideas or speech they disagree with or even despise? This topic should be open to debate. But more quietly, behind the scenes, what about the tweaks to an algorithm, the restrictions on a platform, the things we can't see that shape our information diet in ways that are far less visible? This week, with the sale of TikTok, we found that a multi-billionaire who has advocated monitoring all citizens' behavior, and the U.S. government, which equally appears to have an agenda, will have a major controlling stake on the board of the new TikTok. Even for those who agree with the current government, will you be as happy when another administration is in place and controls that algorithm? After all, the supposed reason for taking over TikTok was to prevent the Chinese from controlling the algorithm. Now, who do you trust controlling it? Which leaves us with a fundamental question. In the age of unseen algorithms, who does get to decide what reaches the public square? And that's our show. One final announcement. This week's shows will be brought to you by my novel, Alyssa, A Tale of Quantum Kisses. This week, we launched the audiobook, read by yours truly. It's now available on Audible and at least 35 or so other venues for audiobooks. And here's something that could be cool. What if even a small percentage of the thousands of listeners we have ordered a copy this week? Would my audiobook become a bestseller? Wouldn't that be cool? If you enjoy hearing me read the news, you might really enjoy me reading this story. Search Elisa, E-L-I-S-A, and Jim Love on Audible or wherever you get audiobooks. That's Elisa, E-L-I-S-A, A Tale of Quantum Kisses, and Jim Love on Audible. We've been getting some great reviews on the book. We're 4.9 out of 5 on Amazon. And the audiobook, if I do say so myself, pretty decent as well. I'm your host, Jim Love, and whether you listen to the book or not, have a marvelous Monday.